Chapter 221. Break one of their arms. After hearing Billy and Simon's vulgar exchange, Willow snapped furiously. "You're despicable." Caspian's expression was as dark as night. How dare these bastards covet his wife? They were done for. Meanwhile, the Reaper had a look of despair as he stood silently. He was caught between a rock and a hard place. He thought Billy and Simon were dooming themselves. "Don't push it, Billy," Rebecca shrieked. "You're feisty, Rebecca, but the more you fight back, the more excited I get." "I like women like you. I'll make you feel real good, but I must warn you, I've got quite the package. You're going to have to adjust to my size tonight." Billy cackled as his words became even more crude. He could already imagine Rebecca moaning beneath him. Trembling with rage, Rebecca cried out, "You're shameless." There was no point in saying anything to someone as shameless as Billy. Terrified, Keller had long since started shaking. He could not afford to offend either Billy or Simon. He knew that Simon was the oldest son of one of the four most prominent families in Dord City, and he was panicking hard. They were in big trouble. "You're fearless, huh? Did you come here for another beating?" Caspian said icily. "Let's see if you can still be this arrogant after this, bastard," Billy bellowed in fury. "Get them. Make sure you don't hurt the two pretty ladies," Billy commanded with a flick of his hand. Immediately, the men behind Billy and Simon rushed forward. The Reaper stood in his spot without moving. He could not join the fight, and neither did he dare to. He knew full well just how terrifyingly powerful Caspian was. Just as Caspian was about to jump into action, a silhouette shot into the room. "Let me handle it, Caspian." Everyone was stunned as a woman showed up. With quick, decisive strikes, she defeated all of Billy's men before they even had a chance to move. Lying all over the floor, they rolled about and howled in pain. "You sure know how to pick your timing, Sylvia," Caspian said with a chuckle. After dealing with those men, Sylvia stood beside Caspian. "How's this possible?" Billy and Simon were stupefied. Where did this beautiful woman come from? And why was she such a good fighter? After seeing three gorgeous ladies standing beside Caspian, both Billy and Simon grew envious. The men they brought with them were all expert fighters in their family's employment that they had carefully selected. But to their shock, a woman had easily dealt with all of them. Just how much stronger was Caspian? Then, he did not even lift a finger. Simon finally understood why Billy got hit. He had met a true expert. "I'm not too late, right, Caspian?" Sylvia asked. Initially, she planned on coming over to Easton tomorrow, but after considering Caspian's safety, she got on the earliest flight she could find. Caspian nodded. Glancing at Billy and Simon, he declared, "Since you insist on causing trouble for yourselves, and you even had the nerve to lust after my wife, I have no choice but to teach you a lesson. Sylvia, break one of their arms. Let this be a lesson they remember." "Got it," Sylvia replied with a nod as she walked over to Billy and Simon. Both men were scared witless and shaking uncontrollably. "How dare you? My dad is the master of Mahayan Pavilion," Billy shouted. "And I'm Simon Landers, the oldest son of the Landers family. Let's see who dares to lay a hand on me." Simon quickly called out as well. Alas, what they said had no effect on Sylvia. She mercilessly broke one of both men's arms. Two agonizing howls echoed in the office. After hearing such anguished cries, the Reaper frowned. He almost felt as if his arm had been broken. Crumpling to the floor, Billy and Simon continued to howl at the top of their lungs. The excruciating pain nearly made them faint. Mahayan Pavilion, oldest son of the Landers family. Are they powerful? Why haven't I heard of them before? You're all just vermin. Sylvia scoffed in derision. Simon was sorely regretting his decision. If he had known this would happen, he would not have agreed to help Billy. In the end, the situation backfired on them, and one of his arms was now broken. Caspian spotted the Reaper, who was standing dazedly, and took a few steps forward. The Reaper stammered when he saw Caspian approaching. "What a coincidence. What's this? Now that your boss is dead, are you working for these two losers?" Caspian asked with a chuckle. Reaper tried his best to rein in his terror, but his hands kept shaking anyway. "Relax. I'm not going to attack you today. Take these two losers away. Don't let them sully my territory," Caspian said indifferently. The Reaper was taken aback at the fact that Caspian was not going to strike him down as well. Don't be so surprised. I just think it's not worth it for me to waste any effort on dealing with someone who has lost to me multiple times now, Caspian remarked with a laugh. This was utter humiliation. The Reaper had never felt as humiliated as he did now. Caspian completely disregarded him. He wanted vengeance. He wanted to kill Caspian. But he was powerless to do so. The Reaper dared not waste any time. He quickly left with Billy and Simon. He was afraid that Caspian would change his mind and attack him as well. Caspian, why didn't you just kill them off? Sylvia asked in confusion. It'd be so boring to kill them outright, Caspian replied meaningfully. Meanwhile, Keller and Rebecca were still in shock. They could not calm down. Billy came over with a group of men to cause trouble for them, but he ended up leaving in disgrace. Initially, Keller was worried that Caspian might not be able to withstand Billy's act of revenge. But now, he realized how unnecessary his concern was. Nevertheless, by doing what he did today, Caspian was not only offending Mahayan Pavilion, but also the Landers family, one of the 4 noble lineages of Easton. Keller could not figure out Caspian's true identity. Why was he unafraid of Easton's mightiest forces? From now on, I'll be relying on you completely, Mr. Lynch, Keller said respectfully. He had made up his mind to work for Caspian and Willow. Rebecca was just as thunderstruck. She did not expect to run into such a powerful figure entirely out of coincidence. The Reaper. Why didn't you join the fight just now? Also, do you know who that guy is? Billy asked immediately after leaving Starsphere Media. They wanted the Reaper to help them in the fight earlier, but he did not budge at all. He's the one who killed Sir Leon, the Reaper replied with a bitter smile. It was not that he did not want to join the fight. He was just too afraid to do so. What did you say? Billy was thunderstruck. His name is Caspian Lynch. He's the matrilocal son, law of the Stewart family in South Lake City, but he seems to have served in the army before. A while back, South Lake City descended into a bloodbath because of him. He also seems to be acquainted with powerful men like John Anderson. I didn't expect him to come to Easton, the Reaper said fearfully. He had a feeling the peace in Easton was about to be disrupted too. I don't care who he is. I'm going to kill him if it's the last thing I do, Billy roared. He, the son of the master of Mahayan Pavilion, had his arm broken by someone. If word got out about this, how could he hold his head up high in Easton? You should go to the hospital and seek treatment first, the Reaper said while shaking his head. Naturally, Billy and Simon did not want to lose their arm for good. Thus, they went to Easton Hospital to get themselves treated. Following the invite sent out by Mahayan Pavilion, an undercurrent seemed to surge among all the forces in Easton. They were startled by Wiley's actions. All along, he had kept a low profile. It was his first time organizing such a grand event in Easton. Afraid of being late, everyone immediately rushed over with their invitation in hand. Who dared to offend Mahayan Pavilion? If anyone offended Wiley, they would not be able to carry on living in Easton. Chapter 222, Caspian's car gets destroyed. Heavy traffic lined the street leading up to Easton's Delta Tower. It was the grandest and most luxurious building in the city. The fact that Wiley was hosting the event here was a testament to his power and influence, especially when he booked the entire building for it. Only a handful of people in Easton could do such a thing. Just then, a green bulletproof SUV pulled up at the entrance to Delta Tower. Caspian, Willow, and the others got out of the car. How majestic! Even Rebecca and Keller were stunned by the grand setting. Due to their involvement in the entertainment industry, they had attended numerous lavish events. But none of those could compare to this one. On the other hand, Caspian and Willow remained largely unaffected. Their wedding, the one Caspian organized, had left such an unforgettable impression on Willow that she thought nothing would ever stun her more than that. Thus, the scene before her did not startle her in any way. She had witnessed such grandeur before. Caspian, you guys can go in first. I'll park the car, Sylvia said. Thus, the rest started heading into the building. Meanwhile, Sylvia drove off to find a parking spot. As a lot of people had come to attend the event, there were not enough parking spaces. At last, Sylvia spotted an empty one. She was just about to park the SUV when a Ferrari shot out in front of her. A red-haired man stuck his head out through the window of the Ferrari, and mocked with scornful expression, "Hey, fucker. Aren't you embarrassed driving around in that pile of scrap metal? This spot's mine." A loud crash rang out as Sylvia drove the SUV straight into the Ferrari. After knocking it out of the way, she expertly parked the SUV. She was about to leave when the red-haired man hollered, "Don't you fucking move. How dare you try to run off after hitting my car?" He was grinding his teeth in fury as he could not believe someone would be this arrogant. Not only did she steal his parking spot, but she even banged his car. The red-haired man was Nigel Hatcher, the oldest son of the Hatcher family, one of Easton's 4 noble lineages. "Do you know who I am? Shouldn't you pay for crashing into my car? Where do you think you're going?" Nigel shouted. "Who are you? What does that have to do with me?" Sylvia retorted indifferently. Nigel was hopping mad. Everyone in Easton knew who the Hatchers were. How dare this woman be so arrogant with him? "I'm Nigel Hatcher, the oldest son of the Hatchers," he declared as he eyed Sylvia haughtily. Not a single Easton resident was unfamiliar with that name. "Oh, are you famous? I haven't heard of you before," Sylvia remarked before walking off. "What the fuck? You bitch." Nigel snarled through gritted teeth. If it wasn't because Sylvia was a pretty woman, he would have hit her already. Just then, a slap rang out. "I dare you to repeat that," Sylvia growled, as she slapped Nigel. Nigel was dumbstruck. Clutching his hurting cheek, he glared at Sylvia. He could not believe she had the nerve to hit him even after he had introduced himself. "What a vicious woman. Don't think I won't hit you just because you're a woman," Nigel roared in fury. He was not a weakling without any fighting prowess. Thanks to the resources available to him, he was proficient in the use of inner strength. Nigel swung his fist at Sylvia, but to his shock, he had only started moving when Sylvia's kick came flying at him. Her kick broke his wrist with a loud crack. At the very next moment, Nigel let out an ear-splitting scream. Sylvia could not be bothered to waste any more time on him. She started heading off to the event. "Sooner or later, I'll make you get on your knees and beg for mercy," Nigel hissed as he watched her leave. He called up a few of his men who came rushing over at once. "Destroy that car," Nigel instructed them. "Yes, sir." Without a moment of hesitation, the men raised their axes and slammed them down on Sylvia's car. Soon, the brand new car was turned into a wreck. "That's for crashing into me and kicking me, you fucker. Say goodbye to fucker. Say goodbye to your car," Nigel growled in satisfaction as he stared at the wrecked SUV. Anyone who dared to mess with him in Easton had a death wish. Once Sylvia's vehicle was turned into a pile of scrap metal, Nigel finally felt better. He had also called up the Hatcher's family doctor. When the doctor arrived, he started tending to Nigel's wrist. "Which arrogant bastard had the nerve to hit you, sir?" the doctor asked as he bandaged Nigel's injury. "It was a brazen chick. I'll get her for this," Nigel declared menacingly. "All done, sir. Your wrist will be fine. You just need to be careful with it for the next few days," the doctor said. With a nod, Nigel replied, "Got it." Then, he marched into the building. He was not going to let things slide. He wanted revenge. After spotting Sylvia, Caspian asked, "What took you so long, Sylvia?" "I ran into a guy who tried to pick a fight, Caspian. I had to waste some time dealing with him, but everything's fine now." "Is the event starting soon?" Sylvia asked. "Not yet. It should be starting in another 10 minutes, Caspian replied. Caspian took Willow's hand and walked over to the buffet. "Let's eat first, Willow. It'll be a while before the event starts," Caspian suggested. He was hungry, as he had not eaten anything since his arrival in Easton. Keller and Rebecca were a little startled by Caspian's and Willow's actions. All of the guests at this event were prominent figures. They came here with only one goal in mind, to establish connections with other influential people and form mutually beneficial relationships. But Caspian was an exception. Without any concern for his image, he dug into the food like a ravenous beast. Although Keller and Rebecca had attended other dinner events before, it was their first time partaking in such a grand one. They looked timid and awkward as they stood still and looked around. For the sake of maintaining her image, Willow only took a few small bites. On the other hand, Caspian made full use of the buffet and ate with relish. "Be mindful of the impression you're giving off, hubby. This isn't a buffet dinner," Willow chided somewhat embarrassedly. Honey, try this canap. It's excellent, Caspian said loudly as he held the piece of food up to Willow's mouth. The surrounding guests heard him and started eyeing him strangely. Chapter 223, Walking into Danger. What do you think, honey? Do you like the canap? Caspian asked. It's delicious, Willow answered with a nod. Just then, Nigel came in. He immediately spotted Sylvia, who was standing beside Caspian. The moment his gaze fell on Willow, his eyes lit up with awe. Nigel was about to settle the score with Sylvia when a voice rang out. What a coincidence, Nigel. Turning around, he saw Billy and Simon. Both had bandaged arms. What happened to the two of you? Nigel asked puzzledly. As famous scions in Easton, they knew each other and got along fairly well. I don't even want to talk about it. Someone beat us up, Billy vented. Thankfully, they got to the hospital in time to treat their injuries. Otherwise, they would have lost their arms for good. Just the thought of Caspian made them seethe. What? Who in Easton has the nerve to lay a hand on you? Nigel exclaimed. When Billy and Simon walked down the streets in Easton, everyone would scramble to get out of their way. No one would dare to offend them. They were the ones everyone feared. Just how reckless and arrogant did someone have to be to attack them? Mahayan Pavilion's power and influence covered the entirety of Easton. No one dared to mess with them. Since Billy was Wiley's son, everyone treated him with respect too. It's just an arrogant bastard. Let's drop the subject, Simon replied while shaking his head. They were well known in Easton. It would be humiliating if word got out that someone had attacked them. With so many people attending the event tonight, there was no telling who could be listening. They did not wish to carry on discussing such a disgraceful incident. By the way, there's a bunch of celebrities and models here tonight. We can seize this chance to have some fun later, Billy declared with a satisfied smirk. Since his father, Wiley, was the one who organized the event, he figured he could have his way with any woman he wanted. Plenty of lesser-known female celebrities attended such events to find themselves a man who could give them a boost in their careers. Even if they did not manage to get themselves a rich husband, they would still receive a ton of benefits just by spending the night with these wealthy young men. Even though Billy and Simon each had an arm and a cast, that did not stop them from lusting after women. Ha ha ha. Now that you mentioned it, I saw a gorgeous woman. She's one in a million, Nigel declared with a leery gaze. Where? Which one? Billy and Simon exclaimed in unison. The very mention of a beautiful woman excited them to no end. Take a look for yourself. Nigel pointed at Willow. The two men looked in the direction Nigel was pointing at, and their expressions immediately soured. They even rubbed their eyes in disbelief when they spotted Caspian. To think that they would run into him here. Just the sight of Caspian made Billy grind his teeth in anger. Still, he dared not covet Caspian's wife anymore. Caspian was far too vicious. Billy knew he could not take another beating. However, Simon and Billy silently exchanged glances. She's indeed a beauty, Nigel. Are you interested in her? Billy asked with a dark chuckle. He figured it could be good if they could get Nigel to make a move on Willow. Perhaps Nigel might even manage to avenge them. I am, but I've got beef with the woman beside her, Nigel said as he pointed at Sylvia. Her? What happened? Billy and Simon asked. That woman crashed into my car and slapped me, Nigel replied. Billy and Simon were thunderstruck. They knew that Sylvia was Caspian's underling, but they did not expect her to be so aggressive. When they saw Nigel's slightly swollen cheek, they felt a lot better. Nigel had suffered at Sylvia's hands too. I forgot to tell you, but that woman is the one who broke our arms too, Billy declared. What? Nigel exclaimed in shock. It was such an uncanny coincidence. Tonight's our chance to get revenge. You're the host, Billy. Since they have the audacity to show up on your territory, they must have a death wish, Nigel said. You're right. Why did I forget about that? This is my dad's event. I can do whatever I want, Billy exclaimed excitedly. To ensure that nothing would go wrong during the event, many powerful bodyguards were stationed all around the place. They were all experts from Mahayan Pavilion. With just a wave of his hand, Billy could get the bodyguards to pummel Caspian and the others. Since Caspian was greatly outnumbered, Billy did not think the former could put up much of a fight. Nigel and Simon quickly spoke up. Billy, Let's get rid of that arrogant bastard first. As for the 3 women, we can have one each, or we can even take turns with all of them. The only way to appease my anger is to see them moaning beneath me. Sure, Billy agreed confidently. This is my territory. I can do whatever I want. He was not afraid of anything. After discussing among themselves, the 3 men sauntered over to Caspian. Hey, punk, you've got quite the nerve to show up at my event. Time to meet your doom. Billy snarled wickedly. Caspian, who was busy sharing his food with Willow, looked up. After spotting Billy and the other 2 men, he frowned. They were like pesky flies. Why could he not shake them off? Get lost. Don't stick around and affect my mood, Caspian ordered icily. Billy, Simon, and Nigel clenched their jaws in rage. Caspian was on their territory. How dare he behave this arrogantly? Hey, you fucker! Do you know whose territory you're on right now? Billy roared. Why are you such a pain in the neck? If you don't leave, you're gonna lose your other arm too. Sylvia threatened with a scornful glance at Billy. Billy shuddered in fright, but he pretended to be unbothered as he had 2 of his friends behind him. He could not humiliate himself. He had to get even. He could not allow someone to break his arm without avenging himself. You're really such an arrogant. Halfway through Billy's sentence, Sylvia raised her hand and slapped him. Billy's body spun a half circle before he stumbled to the floor. In an instant, the bustling hall turned completely silent. Chapter 224, Doomed to Die. All the guests were rendered speechless. No one could believe what they'd just witnessed. Billy, the son of the master of Mahayan Pavilion, had just been slapped in public. Clutching his stinging cheek, Billy spat out some blood. When he saw the looks in everyone's eyes, he felt utterly humiliated. Caspian was the one who slapped him back then, and this time, it was Sylvia. It was not just a slap to Billy's face but to Mahayan Pavilion as well. What happened, Mr. Billy? The head of the security team asked. He had immediately rushed over after seeing Billy getting hit. Fuck. Catch all of them. I'm going to teach them a lesson, Billy roared. How dare you disrespect Mr. Billy? The head of the security team growled as he eyed Caspian, Sylvia, and the others. With a flick of his hand, he ordered, "Get them." In an instant, the dozens of bodyguards inside the hall rushed forward. The spectating crowd began to pity Caspian. Only a fool would attack Billy at tonight's event. Caspian was the first person to ever cause trouble while standing on Mahayan Pavilion's territory. Simon and Nigel cackled. Caspian was done for. Billy struggled to his feet with the help of a bodyguard. "I'll kill you if it's the last thing I do," Billy bellowed at Caspian. He had to get even, especially under these circumstances. If he did not retaliate after being humiliated in public, the entire Mahayan Pavilion would be disgraced and suffer ridicule from others. Caspian's expression was solemn as he watched the approaching bodyguards. Sylvia was prepared to attack. Her mission was to keep Caspian safe. Plus, when she came over, she had informed the man in charge of Easton of Caspian's arrival. "Hold it. I'll handle it myself," Caspian said to Sylvia before stepping forward. "Understood, Caspian," Sylvia replied respectfully as she remained in her spot. By now, Willow was used to such tense situations. She had encountered them many times. Caspian's figure dashed forward. All the others could see was a blur. "You're all useless," Caspian snapped. His fists were almost invisible as he weaved through the crowd of bodyguards. Everyone was stupefied. They could not even see what Caspian was doing. In less than 3 minutes, Caspian had defeated all the bodyguards. They were all lying on the floor and howling in pain. How is this possible? The crowd was thunderstruck. Earlier on, they pitied Caspian and thought he was doomed. No one expected Caspian to be such a mighty fighter. Despite outnumbering Caspian by the dozens, the security team could not put up a fight against him at all. "You really don't know when to stop, huh? I'm going to have to teach you a lesson you'll never forget," Caspian growled as he approached Billy. "What are you doing? I've got my men with me. You'd better watch out," Billy cried out in alarm as he took in Caspian's stormy expression. "Let's see who dares to attack Mr. Billy," the head of the security team shouted as he charged at Caspian. Alas, with just a single punch from Caspian, the man fell to the ground without even getting the chance to strike. Upon seeing this, Billy descended into despair. The head of the security team was an expert fighter adept in the use of inner strength. Yet, he could not even withstand a single blow from Caspian. "You fucker. I'm the son of the master of Mahayan Pavilion. If you lay a hand on me, my dad will have your head," Billy threatened fiercely. The situation was getting too dangerous, so he had no choice but to drop Wiley's name. "Mahayan Pavilion, are they powerful?" Caspian asked in amusement. Caspian raised his leg to kick Billy in the crotch. "No. Don't. No." Billy screamed in terror. If the kick landed, he would lose the ability to perform as a man. Right at that moment, a high-sounding voice called out, "Lord Jennings has arrived." Immediately, hundreds of people from Mahayan Pavilion entered the hall. A middle-aged man dressed in black walked in commandingly. "Dad, save me," Billy shouted the moment Wiley appeared. If Wiley had come any later, Billy would have lost his manhood. "Halt! Who dares to cause a scene at my event?" Wiley shouted with a grim expression when he saw that Caspian was about to attack Billy. Caspian smirked before stomping his foot down on Billy's crotch. The muffled sound of something being crushed made everyone tense up. They were thunderstruck. Had this man gone mad? He had the audacity to injure Billy right under Wiley's nose. Just how brazen was he? Rolling on the floor, Billy screamed in agony. He had just lost what he considered the most essential part of him that made him a man. Simon and Nigel felt their lower abdomens tensing up. They subconsciously used their hands to shield their crotch. They exchanged looks of disbelief. Caspian was terrifying. He was insane. Mahayan Pavilion would not let him get away with this. "Why, you?" Wiley roared. He was trembling with rage. Who was the young man who attacked Billy right in front of him? Meanwhile, Billy was overwhelmed with despair. The thought of him never getting to enjoy the pleasure of being with a beautiful woman made him lose all will to live. Consumed by his emotions, he spat out a mouthful of blood before falling unconscious. Many of the guests present revealed Billy's predicament. Billy abused his status in Easton to no end, and many had suffered at his hands. But from today onward, he was impotent. "You bastard, you've got a death wish," Wiley howled in fury. Even though Billy was utterly useless, he was still Wiley's only son. Now that Billy was impotent, there was no longer anyone to carry on the Jennings family name, and that thought made Wiley feel murderous. It's the parents' responsibility to teach their children, but since you failed to teach him properly, I had to do it for you, Caspian remarked indifferently as he looked at Wiley. "How dare you offend Mahayan Pavilion? You're dead meat," Wiley bellowed as he glared darkly at Caspian. Wiley had organized this event in the hopes of establishing connections with all of the powerful people in Easton. But instead, he had to witness someone turning Billy impotent. If he did not kill Caspian today, no one in Easton would ever respect Mahayan Pavilion ever again. "Get him," Wiley ordered with a flick of his hand. Over 200 people from Mahayan Pavilion immediately surrounded Caspian. Upon seeing this, everyone present knew that Wiley was infuriated. This time, Caspian was certainly doomed to die. Chapter 225 Submission. Just as the people from Mahayan Pavilion were about to attack Caspian, a few announcements were made. Mr. Melvin Jones, the leader of Celestial Sanctum, has arrived. Mr. John Landers, the head of the Landers family, has arrived. Mr. Herman Hatcher, the head of the Hatcher family, has arrived. Mr. Jackson Perez, the head of the Perez family, has arrived. Mr. Howard Luckerman, the head of the Luckerman family, has arrived. Everyone thought Caspian was done for. Melvin and the heads of the 4 noble lineages strode into the hall. From the looks of it, they had agreed beforehand to come over together. Meanwhile, Wiley's expression froze in shock. He did not know what was going on. Why were Melvin and the 4 heads of 4 noble lineages showing up at the event together? Did they establish some kind of alliance in private? The thought of that possibility weighed heavily on Wiley. It was the worst possible outcome for him. Even though Mahayan Pavilion was powerful, it could not stop other forces from joining hands. Wiley was not the only one who thought of this. Everyone present could see what such an alliance meant. The crowd knew they made the right decision by attending the event. They were in for a good show. "Mr. Jones, welcome," Wiley said as he approached Melvin Jones with a smile. Though they did not get along, he still needed to keep up with appearances when in public. But to the guests' shock, Melvin, the leader of Celestial Sanctum, as well as the heads of the 4 noble lineages, ignored Wiley. They walked up to Caspian and kneeled before him. "Greetings, Mr. Lynch. I'm Melvin Jones, the leader of Celestial Sanctum." "Greetings, Mr. Lynch. I'm John Landers." "Greetings, Mr. Lynch. I'm Herman Hatcher." "Greetings, Mr. Lynch. I'm Jackson Perez." "Greetings, Mr. Lynch. I'm Howard Luckerman." All 5 men treated Caspian with the utmost respect. What was going on? Everyone was flabbergasted. They could not figure out the situation. Even Wiley was dumbfounded. Why did things take such a sudden turn? "Dad, why are you kneeling in front of this bastard?" Nigel walked over to Herman and asked in confusion. Herman immediately slapped Nigel. "Kneel. Apologize to Mr. Lynch," he commanded. "What?" Nigel was still clueless as he clutched his hurting cheek, while Herman forced him onto his knees. Alarmed, Simon quickly got on his knees as well. Though he did not understand what was happening, he had a strong feeling that Caspian had a powerful background. "We failed to teach our children properly, Mr. Lynch. If my son has offended you, feel free to punish him as you wish," Herman said anxiously. "Yes, Mr. Lynch. I've done a poor job of teaching my son. You may do whatever you want to him," John said respectfully. Simon and Nigel turned pale as they shook in fear. Why were things turning out like this? Their fathers, Herman and John, were among heads of the 4 noble lineages in Easton. Why did they have to kneel in front of Caspian? The 2 young men could not think of a reasonable explanation, but they could sense just how terrifying Caspian was. "The situation has nothing to do with us, Mr. Lynch. Billy is the one who incited us." "That's right, Mr. Lynch. Please have mercy on us." Still on their knees, Simon and Nigel begged for forgiveness. They sorely regretted messing with Caspian, but alas, it was too late. They had made an unforgivable mistake. "You 2 were pretty arrogant just now. You not only wanted to kill me, but you even wanted to assault my wife. Still think you can do it?" Caspian uttered coldly. "No, we'd never dare to." Simon and Nigel vehemently shook their heads. If they had known that Caspian came from such a powerful background, they never would have dared to do anything to him. "You bastard. From today onward, you're no longer part of the Landers family," John fumed. "And you, I'm cutting off all ties with you today," Herman declared. John and Herman were so incensed that they hastily disowned their sons. Nigel and Simon looked as if all the life had been sapped out of them. If they were kicked out of their families, they would lose everything and become one of the masses. Without their family's protection, everyone would come after them for revenge. They would even lose their lives. Alas, both men had made many enemies. "Dad, please don't kick me out of the family. I'm begging you, please give me another chance. I didn't do it on purpose," Nigel pleaded. "Dad, I didn't know he was a powerful figure. Otherwise, I would never have dared to mess with him." Simon howled. He was used to being a scion. If he got kicked out of the family, life would be a living hell for him. Half an hour ago, Melvin had received a call from Easton's first in command. Melvin was immediately informed that someone powerful had arrived in Easton, and he even received a photo of that person. To establish a connection with the heads of the 4 noble lineages and gain their support, he shared the news with Thien. The heads of the 4 noble lineages were stunned and instantly realized the seriousness of the situation. Someone who Easton's first in command viewed in such high regard could not be an ordinary person. As Easton was the 2nd most prosperous city in Diatoran, the man in charge of Easton was a major player in Diatoran's political scene too. One could only imagine just how important the visitor had to be that even such a powerful figure was personally making arrangements for him. Having understood the situation, the heads of the 4 noble lineages dared not show any kind of disrespect. They swiftly came over to the event with Mervyn to check out the powerful visitor for themselves. The 4 noble lineages combined wielded a significant amount of influence in Easton, but even so, they were nothing compared to Easton's first in command. In that case, just how important of a person Caspian had to be that even the first in command respected him so. Since Nigel and Simon had offended Caspian, Herman and John had no choice but to disown them. Even though they were the oldest sons of the families, for the sake of the family's best interest, they had to be sacrificed. If the powerful visitor was angered, their families would suffer, and things would be a lot worse for them than just losing a son. In fact, by kicking Nigel and Simon out of the family, the lives of these two young men would be spared. Nigel despaired as Herman did not even budge. He knew that he made a terrible mistake today. Otherwise, Herman would not be ignoring his desperate pleas. Simon felt the same way. He knew he was done for. Men, drag this incorrigible punk out. From now on, he's not allowed to step foot into Hatcher residence, Herman ordered. Two of the Hatcher family's subordinates hauled Nigel out, and the Landers family subordinates did the same with Simon. Herman and John continued to kneel on the floor as they awaited further instructions from Caspian. Seeing as the two heads of the families had acted decisively, Caspian chuckled. Simon and Nigel had received the punishment they deserved. That's enough. You may rise, Caspian said as he glanced at Sylvia. He did not tell anyone about his arrival in Easton, so there was only one explanation for this situation. Sylvia had let the word out. True enough, when Sylvia caught Caspian's eye, she flashed him a faint smile. Greetings, Mr. Lynch. I'm Melvin Jones, the 41st leader of Celestial Sanctum. I've had the honor of hearing about your glorious accomplishments, Melvin said to Caspian with a look of reverence. Chapter 226 Who Dares to Lay a Hand on Mr. Lynch? Upon hearing what Melvin said, Caspian felt puzzled. He did not recall having any kind of connection to Celestial Sanctum. Sylvia, who was standing beside Caspian, reminded quietly, a few years ago, a foreign force rose up in Easton. You led the team in a mission to eradicate that force. At the time, Melvin had only just become the leader of Celestial Sanctum. Oh, is that so? I wouldn't have remembered if you didn't mention it, Caspian commented. As Lord Caspian, the Diaturanian god of war, he had overseen countless fights and battles of varying magnitude. Naturally, he had completely forgotten about such a minor incident. At the time, he merely oversaw the battle from afar and had not come over to Easton in person, so he could not remember many details. A few years ago, Melvin had only just become the leader of Celestial Sanctum when a major incident rocked Easton. Due to that, Celestial Sanctum started declining and only recently managed to regain some of its former glory. All the members of Celestial Sanctum were determined to reclaim their position as the most powerful force in Easton. Caspian, Celestial Sanctum can be considered a righteous force in Easton. They're not like Mahayan Pavilion. Maybe we can consider giving them a chance, Sylvia suggested. She had looked into Celestial Sanctum before. Even though they seemed like a criminal gang, in reality, they had never done anything immoral. At the very least, they did not stoop to the levels of Mahayan Pavilion. Got it, Caspian said to Sylvia with a nod. Then, he turned to Melvin and said, if you wish to lead Celestial Sanctum back to its former glory, you only need to do one thing, wipe out Mahayan Pavilion. Everyone present was stupefied. They wondered if they had just misheard Caspian. Did he just ask Melvin to wipe out Mahayan Pavilion? Who was Caspian? Why did even the leader of Celestial Sanctum take orders from him? Understood. Melvin was alarmed by Caspian's words, too, but he immediately agreed without hesitation. All this while, Melvin made sure Celestial Sanctum kept a low profile because he was biding his time. He was waiting until the day they could destroy Mahayan Pavilion and reclaim their position as the most powerful force in Easton. As if you can wipe out Mahayan Pavilion just because you want to. You two sure know how to brag. Wiley guffawed without a care in the world. Even now, he did not think Caspian was someone of any importance. Yet, Caspian had the gall to claim he wanted to wipe out Mahayan Pavilion. It was a delusional fantasy. Wiley glowered murderously at Caspian. No matter what happened, he wanted to kill Caspian, despite not knowing Caspian's true identity. He could tell from Melvin's respectful attitude that Caspian was no ordinary person. Tonight was the best chance he could get. The place was filled with Mahayan Pavilion's people. Even if Melvin dared to make a move, he could not do anything. Ignoring Wiley, Caspian said, Melvin, I give you 3 days to wipe out Mahayan Pavilion. If you can do it, I won't question what Celestial Sanctum does after that. However, if you fail, I see no reason to keep Celestial Sanctum around any longer. Upon hearing that, Melvin trembled. He did not dare to doubt what Caspian was capable of. Rest assured, Mr. Lynch. 3 days is enough time, Melvin replied with a nod. Let's go. Willow, Caspian said to Willow, as he looked at her gently. Just moments ago, he was the imposing Lord Caspian. But now, he merely seemed like an ordinary man who doted on his wife. Everyone could not connect the two sides of him. Was he still the same person? Why did his demeanor change so abruptly? All right, Willow said compliantly. Caspian took Willow's hand and started walking. Wiley was outraged that Caspian had completely ignored him. With a twisted expression, he bellowed, "You think you can walk out just like that after hurting my son and ruining my event? Who do you think I am?" As soon as he spoke, all the people from Mahayan Pavilion began surrounding Caspian. Initially, Wiley wanted to use this event to raise his reputation. But thanks to Caspian, Mahayan Pavilion was made a laughingstock tonight. As the master of Mahayan Pavilion, Wiley was not letting Caspian get away so easily. If Caspian was able to walk out of the place unscathed, no one would respect Mahayan Pavilion anymore. Caspian ignored Caspian. He simply glanced at Melvin. Melvin immediately roared, "Let's see who dares to stop Mr. Lynch." He gave the order, and hundreds of people from Celestial Sanctum rushed into the hall. With fearsome expressions and domineering stances, the armed men engaged in a standoff against those from Mahayan Pavilion. "Melvin Jones, are you declaring war against Mahayan Pavilion today?" Wiley snarled in anger. He never thought that Celestial Sanctum, which had been lying low the whole time, would make such a risky stance for Caspian. "I'm not trying to declare war between us, Wiley, but since you intend to harm Mr. Lynch, I have no choice but to come forward to protect him," Melvin declared. "Why, you..." Wiley did not expect the situation to turn out like this. If both forces clashed, it would certainly lead to a bloodbath in Easton. The heads of the four noble lineages exchanged looks. "Anyone who dares to lay a hand on Mr. Lynch will have to answer to us," they shouted in unison. At the same time, their people stormed into the hall. In an instant, the hall was filled with people from numerous different factions and forces. Wiley's expression darkened. Initially, he wanted to use this event to win over the four noble lineages and ally with them. He never would have thought that they would stand against Mahayan Pavilion for Caspian's sake. Were they not afraid of being annihilated? "Have you thought about what would happen if the four noble lineages stood against Mahayan Pavilion?" Wiley said coldly. "We swear to protect Mr. Lynch with our lives," the four family heads declared together. Mahayan Pavilion was slowly getting more powerful and starting to suppress the other forces. In Easton, truth be told, the other forces had long since wanted to join hands to take down Mahayan Pavilion. Caspian, someone with a powerful and mysterious background, became their beacon of hope. "Do you still want to stop me, Wiley?" Caspian asked indifferently. Wiley ground his teeth in fury. Though he sorely wanted to tell his men to attack Caspian, he dared not give the order. The situation had spun out of control. Mahayan Pavilion was up against the combined forces of Celestial Sanctum and the four noble lineages. Even if they emerged victorious, it would come at a heavy price. Wiley could not even imagine the catastrophic losses they would face. "Mahayan Pavilion, huh? What a hollow reputation," Caspian remarked with a smirk. Under everyone's watchful gazes, Caspian took Willow by the hand and left. As Wiley stared after Caspian and Willow, he turned bright red with fury. Caspian had just insulted Mahayan Pavilion. Chapter 227. The fight begins. "Goodbye, Mr. Lynch. Have a good night, Mr. Lynch." Melvin and the heads of the four noble lineages nodded in respect. Once Caspian and Willow had left the hall, Melvin narrowed his eyes and looked at Wiley, saying coldly, "From this moment onward, Celestial Sanctum officially declares war on Mahayan Pavilion." Then, he and his subordinates left. Today, the four noble lineages of Easton officially declare war on Mahayan Pavilion. The people from the four noble lineages left as well. "Lord Jennings, I just remembered I have something urgent to do, so I'll take my leave now. Let's meet again sometime, Lord Jennings." Now that Celestial Sanctum and the four noble lineages had declared war on Mahayan Pavilion, the guests swiftly came up with reasons to leave. They could not afford to stand on the wrong side. Everyone could tell that a deathly fight would break out between Mahayan Pavilion and Celestial Sanctum. No one wanted to get caught up in it. Only those who were already at a clear disadvantage would choose a side now. In just minutes, the bustling hall emptied. Wiley turned pale with fury. His grand event had ended in shambles, and it was all because of Caspian. Never would he have expected Celestial Sanctum and the four noble lineages to declare war against him, just for Caspian's sake. It seemed like the bloody battle was unavoidable. We have a crisis on our hands. Lord Jennings, what should we do now? Homer Flynn, a white-haired elderly man, asked after approaching Wiley. Anyone who stands against Mahayan Pavilion must die. We'll kill them. Whoever they are. Mahayan Pavilion was established decades ago. They had a solid foundation and a lot of resources. He firmly believed that even if Celestial Sanctum joined forces with the four noble lineages, they still would not be able to wipe out Mahayan Pavilion so easily. Tell everyone at Mahayan Pavilion to prepare for battle at once, Wiley commanded with a grim expression. Yes, Lord Jennings, Homer replied before walking off to get the preparations done. However, he had only taken a single step when he stopped and asked, Lord Jennings, what about Mr. Billy? Don't bring up that useless punk. Why did he piss off such a powerful figure? Send him to Easton Hospital for treatment first, Wiley instructed darkly. A few of his subordinates swiftly took the unconscious Billy away. In the span of one night, the incident at Delta Tower caused a huge uproar in Easton. On that very night itself, Celestial Sanctum and the four noble lineages joined forces and attacked many of Mahayan Pavilion's territories. By the end of the night, Mahayan Pavilion suffered heavy losses, including multiple territories. Lord Jennings, in just one night, Celestial Sanctum and the four noble lineages had seized hundreds of our casinos, bars, and establishments. Homer reported to Wiley. He handed over the list he had drawn up. After glancing through it, Wiley immediately ripped the document into shreds. In just one night, Mahayan Pavilion had lost hundreds of millions. Though they had a wealth of resources, they would not be able to survive if they suffered such heavy losses every day. Damn it. Have Celestial Sanctum and the four noble lineages decided to go all out in their battle against us? Wiley raged. Lord Jennings, we can't just sit around and do nothing while Celestial Sanctum and the four noble lineages seize our territories. If we don't fight back, how are we ever to hold our heads up high in Easton ever again? Homer said grimly. We're fighting back, of course. Give the order right away. From this moment onward, we're going to launch a full assault on Celestial Sanctum and the four noble lineages. Let them see what we're capable of. Let them see who's the most powerful in Easton, Wiley commanded. Yes, Lord Jennings, Homer replied. Soon, Mahayan Pavilion started fighting back. The entirety of Easton descended into chaos as the forces clashed in every corner of the city. All the people in Easton descended into a state of fear and panic. Even though Mahayan Pavilion immediately fought back as hard as it could, Celestial Sanctum and the four noble lineages still caused a great deal of problems. Going up against the combined strength of five forces, Mahayan Pavilion was stretched thin. Among the five, Celestial Sanctum's men fought the most fiercely. That was because Caspian had given them 3 days to annihilate Mahayan Pavilion. Thus, every person in Celestial Sanctum flew into a frenzy. They had been biding their time long enough. Now that they could openly fight Mahayan Pavilion, they were not holding back. As Mahayan Pavilion continued to lose more and more of its territories, Wiley started to feel threatened. Wiley was inside the hall of Mahayan Pavilion when Homer came in and said, Lord Jennings, the Reaper requests an urgent audience with you. Tell him to get lost. I don't have the time to deal with him, Wiley growled. In the past, he would have spared a few minutes of civility for the Reaper just for the sake of appearances. But now that Mahayan Pavilion was in danger, he could not be bothered to entertain him. But the Reaper says he has something urgent to report to you, Homer said with a frown. Let him in, Wiley responded as his brows knitted together. After coming in, the Reaper nodded and said respectfully, Greetings, Lord Jennings. What do you want? Out with it. I don't have the time to listen to your nonsense. Wiley glanced at the Reaper and snapped impatiently. The Reaper was not offended by Wiley's annoyed demeanor. He knew what was going on with Mahayan Pavilion. Lord Jennings, I know you're currently concerned about the attacks from Celestial Sanctum and the four noble lineages. This situation is related to Caspian, and I know some things about him, the Reaper solemnly declared. You do. Immediately, Wiley's interest was piqued. He had asked his people to investigate Caspian, to no avail. Why are you just standing there then? Hurry up and tell me, Wiley urged. At first, Caspian was just the matrilocal son-in-law of the Stewart family in South Lake City, the Reaper began. What? A matrilocal son-in-law? Wiley's expression stiffened in shock. Why would Celestial Sanctum fear a matrilocal son-in-law? On the surface, he's only a matrilocal son-in-law, but in reality, he has another identity. He served in the army for a few years. A while ago, he stirred up an uproar in South Lake City. He massacred the flying dragons of South Lake City, as well as the York family. Even Sir Leon died at his hands. What did you say? Caspian's the one who killed Leonardo, Wiley exclaimed. He was dumbstruck. How could a matrilocal son-in-law accomplish such things? Even though Leonardo was not as powerful as Mahayan Pavilion, he was still the most powerful in the Two Lakes area. It seemed entirely unbelievable that such a powerful being had been killed by a matrilocal son-in-law like Caspian. Chapter 228 Joining Forces. Why are you only telling me about Caspian's background now? Wiley asked as he fixed his eyes on the Reaper. Caspian killed Leonardo and many of my friends. He's even trying to go up against you now, Lord Jennings, so I hope you will eliminate him. By doing so, not only will you be upholding your dignity, but you'll also be avenging Sir Leon, the Reaper declared fiercely. Ha! Wiley scoffed. The Reaper had not given up yet. In the past, Wiley would have found some excuse to brush off the Reaper. But now, Caspian was a threat to Mahayan Pavilion, and he would not be happy if he did not get rid of Caspian. You said it yourself. Caspian has a mysterious background. He's not someone I can kill just because I want to, Wiley retorted. He was not a fool. After seeing how arrogant Caspian was yesterday, he knew that Caspian had to come from an incredibly powerful background. Also, he knew Leonardo's death was definitely not as simple as it seemed. Leonardo was a Tier 3 expert, and the Reaper was also an expert in the use of inner strength. Yet, one had died at Caspian's hands, and the other fled to Easton, too afraid to take revenge. Anyone with half a mind could tell that Caspian was no pushover. It would be foolish for Wiley to attack Caspian before figuring out just who the latter truly was. And as the master of Mahayan Pavilion, Wiley would not make such a silly mistake. Leonardo had been killed because of his carelessness. He thought he could easily deal with Caspian, but in the end, all of his men died at Caspian's hands. The Reaper was not surprised by Wiley's hesitance. He saw it coming. Lord Jennings, I know of a way to get rid of Caspian, the Reaper declared. Tell me quickly, Wiley urged. Caspian has offended many people, including the York family from Dord City. We can find a way to ally with them to kill Caspian, the Reaper shared. In reality, he had come up with a plan to deal with Caspian a long time ago. As long as Wiley reached out to the York family from Dord City and suggested a partnership, there was a high chance the family would agree. Is that so? I didn't expect Caspian to have so many enemies. He even offended the York family from Dord City. Huh. Guess he's done for this time, Wiley remarked with a sneer. Although the Yorks of Dord City were not one of the top families, they were still considered an elite family. If Mahayan Pavilion joined forces with the Yorks, even if everyone else in Easton worked together, the latter would still fail to defeat the former. Mr. Flynn, I'll have to trouble you to make the trip to Dord City and get in touch with the Yorks, Wiley said to Homer. Yes, Lord Jennings, I'll go right away, Homer replied with a nod. At last, the Reaper exhaled in relief. As long as Mahayan Pavilion and the Yorks worked together, Caspian would not be leaving Easton alive. As soon as Celestia returned home to her family in Dord City, she immediately informed her father, Wendell York, of what happened in South Lake City. He was the current head of the York family in Dord City. Dad, someone bullied me. You have to stand up for me. That guy Caspian Lynch not only killed Leonardo, but he even made us lose so many assets. And worst of all, he brutally murdered Mr. Bassett, Celestia reported. How dare he? Wendell fumed as he slammed his hand against the stone table in front of him. Who's this Caspian Lynch? What's his background? How dare he go against us? Does he think we're pushovers? Wendell continued raging. He was not furious over Adam's death or his daughter getting bullied. What infuriated him the most was Leonardo's death. It meant that the York family in Dord City would be losing a lot of resources. Throughout these years, the Yorks managed to rise to the ranks of a lesser-known elite family in Dord City, mainly because Leonardo had given them most of the resources he gathered in the Two Lakes area. Now that Leonardo was dead, the York family was basically losing all of the businesses and resources in the area. For the time being, it would not have much of an effect on the Yorks, but in the long run, their influence would undoubtedly be significantly impacted. The power balance in Dord City was complicated. All of the elite families were looking for opportunities to boost their standing. If their influence started to fall, the other elite families would seize the chance to bring them down. If that happened, the Yorks in Dord City would be in a perilous situation. "Dad, you'll help me get revenge, right?" Celestia quickly asked. All along, she had a peaceful and easy life in Dord City. She thought she would not have any problems reclaiming some assets during her trip to the Two Lakes area. Who would have thought that she would suffer at Caspian's hands and even get slapped? When had she ever been treated with such disrespect? Celestia could not let things slide just like that. However, Wendell did not rush into a decision. If Caspian could easily deal with Leonardo, the kingpin in the Two Lakes area, that meant he had a few tricks up his sleeve. Furthermore, Adam and Leonardo were both martial arts experts. They were no slouches in fights. This was especially true of Leonardo, who was about to reach his peak as a Tier 3 expert, but he, too, had been killed by Caspian. That alone proved Caspian's might. With such power, he could even gain prominence in Dord City. Before figuring out Caspian's background, Wendell dared not make any hasty decisions. If Caspian came from a powerful background, the Yorks would only be walking to their doom if they attacked him recklessly. Celestia saw the uncertainty in Wendell's expression. She was frustrated, but she dared not say anything. She knew full well that Wendell had total control over the York family. No one could change his mind or try to influence his decision. A few days later, Celestia and Wendell were having tea together when the family butler came in and said, "Someone is here to see you, sir." "Who is it?" Wendell asked puzzledly. "He says he's an elder from Mahayan Pavilion in Easton, and he's here to discuss a partnership with you," the butler replied. A partnership? Wendell was confused. Mahayan Pavilion was the strongest faction in Easton, and on par with the Yorks in terms of power. However, the two did not have any dealings with each other, so why was Mahayan Pavilion approaching him for a partnership? "Lead him in," Wendell instructed. Half a minute later, Homer came in. "Greetings, Mr. York. I'm Homer Flynn, an elder of Malayan Pavilion." Wendell eyed Homer and asked, "If I recall correctly, the Yorks and Mahayan Pavilion don't have any dealings with each other. Why have you come to see me today?" "I'm here under the orders of Lord Jennings, the master of Mahayan Pavilion. He wants me to discuss a partnership with you." "We have a common enemy," Homer declared. "A common enemy? Please clarify," Wendell said with a frown. "I'm sure you're familiar with the name Caspian Lynch, right, Mr. York?" Homer asked. Caspian Lynch. As soon as Wendell heard the name, he jumped to his feet. For the past few days, he had been trying to think of a way to deal with Caspian. And, by sheer coincidence, Mahayan Pavilion sought to join forces with him to do just that. Caspian seemed to have offended a lot of people in Diatorin. "Is there a conflict between Caspian and Mahayan Pavilion?" Wendell asked. "That's right," Homer replied. Immediately after showing up in Easton, Caspian convinced Celestial Sanctum and 4 of the city's strongest elite families to join forces and stand against Mahayan Pavilion. After hearing that the York family has a grudge against Caspian, Lord Jennings sent me over in the hopes that we can work together and combine our forces to kill Caspian. Chapter 229, Attacking on Two Fronts. All of a sudden, Wendell guffawed. Then, he shot a piercing gaze at Homer and asked, "So, you want to kill Caspian, huh? Do you have a plan?" "We plan on using our forces to keep Caspian in Easton. The Yorks can immediately send people over to South Lake City and seize South Lake Corporation, which belongs to Caspian's wife. Then, you can join us in Easton. We'll trap him by attacking him on 2 fronts." Homer freely shared the plan that had been devised. It sounded flawless. Caspian would not be able to escape. No matter how powerful he was, he could not defend himself on all fronts. Once chaos broke out in South Lake City, he would have to either choose to return or give up on his wife's company. "Excellent," What a marvelous idea. That's settled. Then, we, the Yorks, are willing to join forces with Mahayan Pavilion to defeat Caspian, Wendell declared in excitement. You've made the wise choice, Mr. York. Right now, South Lake Corporation, which belongs to Caspian's wife, Willow Stewart, has taken full control over the business market in South Lake City. As long as you settle the situation in South Lake City, the company's yours, Homer added. He was just as ecstatic. Wonderful. Wendell laughed. The issue that had stumped him for days now was finally getting resolved. As long as they got rid of Caspian, the Yorks would gain full control over South Lake City, and Mahayan Pavilion would also be the most powerful force in Easton. This solution benefited both of them. Once Homer left, Celestia cried out excitedly, "This is a great plan, Dad. Caspian won't know what's coming for him. He's doomed." Of course. If we can gain full control over South Lake City, we'll be able to become one of the top elite families in Dord City, Wendell said with a nod. It had always been their goal to become a top elite family. After all, being one of the top families was significantly different than being one of the lesser-known ones. Many lesser-known elite families spent centuries without making it into the top tier of elite families, all because they lacked the right opportunity. Celestia, you lost last time because you didn't have enough people with you. This time, I plan on giving you 100 Tier 2 experts to bring with you, as well as 10 Tier 3 experts and an Eternal Grandmaster. Your mission is to take back the Two Lakes area and seize Caspian's wife's company. Wendell instructed with a serious expression. For the sake of reclaiming the resources and business market in the Two Lakes area, Wendell went so far as to dispatch many of the family's expert fighters. The physique of ordinary people only allowed them to become Tier 1 experts at most. The more advanced levels included the Tier 2 and Tier 3 experts, as well as Eternal Grandmasters and Innate Grandmasters. The more powerful a martial arts expert was, the harder it was to climb up the ranks. After all these years, the Yorks only managed to train up a single Eternal Grandmaster. For the sake of the resources from the Two Lakes area, Wendell sent out the family's only Eternal Grandmaster as well. I'll do a good job, Dad. Celestia answered with a nod. She smiled at the thought of punishing Caspian. We only have one chance. Failure is not an option, Wendell warned grimly. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Understood. Celestia nodded before heading off to start gathering the people. Once Celestia left, Wendell began to sip his coffee again. He was smiling faintly. Since the York family's only Eternal Grandmaster was joining the fight, there was no way they would lose this time. Half a day later, Celestia and the York's subordinates had arrived in South Lake City. What should we do now, Ms. York? An elderly man dressed in black asked Celestia. Even just standing there, the man gave off such a commanding air that everyone around him seemed to suffocate from the pressure. The elderly man in black was Ivan Goff, a martial arts expert who had recently become an Eternal Grandmaster. Adam, the one who died a while back, was Ivan's student. He was joining the fight this time to not only take back what rightfully belonged to the Yorks, but also to avenge Adam as well. We shouldn't waste time. Let's head over to South Lake Corporation's branch office and seize it first, Celestia instructed. With a large team of fighters at her command, Celestia was a lot more confident. She led the York family's team of experts to South Lake Corporation's branch office with one goal in mind: to get a swift and decisive victory. Her goal was to take over the entire South Lake Corporation before Caspian and Willow got back. Over at South Lake Corporation's branch office, Jeffrey was busy working. Willow had made him the general manager of the branch office. He was even getting a salary of $10 million. Honored by the trust Willow had in him, Jeffrey made sure to do his job properly. Recently, the branch office had also seen a growth in profits. Jeffrey was signing some documents when the door to his office was abruptly kicked open. Startled, he quickly looked up and saw Celestia barging in with a group of people. "Celestia, why are you here again?" Jeffrey exclaimed. He did not expect Celestia to return after leaving with her tail between her legs. Previously, Caspian had warned Celestia that he would kill her if she appeared in South Lake City again. Celestia waltzed into the office and sat down on the couch. Smiling, she remarked, "You must be shocked, Jeffrey. Well, I'll tell you what's going on. This time, I'm definitely taking back everything that belongs to the York family, including South Lake Corporation. I don't want to see you. Leave. and take your people with you," Jeffrey said exasperatedly. In reality, he was a little afraid of her. "Ha ha ha. Why should I leave just because you tell me to? It'd be a disgrace," Celestia scoffed with an evil smirk. "Security, someone's causing trouble here. Chase them out," Jeffrey shouted. "Alas, no one came in. Don't bother. They're all taking a nap on the floor," Celestia said with a chuckle. Jeffrey turned to look outside and saw the security guards rolling on the floor in pain. "Why, you..." Jeffrey was stupefied. The Yorks came prepared this time. He grabbed his phone to call Caspian, but someone immediately snatched it and crushed it to bits. Jeffrey looked up in shock, only to find an elderly man in black glaring at him. "What are you doing?" Before Jeffrey could finish his sentence, Ivan grabbed him by the neck and lifted him. In an instant, Jeffrey's face turned scarlet. He could not breathe. "Should I kill him, Ms. York?" Ivan asked. "This bastard Jeffrey not only failed to help us, but he even betrayed us. Break his legs and hang him up outside the building. Let everyone know what happens when they cross us. The Yorks of Dord City," Celestia declared haughtily. "Understood." Ivan nodded and did as told without hesitation. He threw Jeffrey onto the floor and stomped on the latter's legs. 2 loud cracks rang out. Jeffrey's bones had been broken. He howled in agony as all the color drained out of his face. A few of the York family's men came over and hauled him out. Chapter 230, The 4 Noble Lineages Decision. "Just you wait, Celestia. Mr. Lynch will make you pay for this." Jeffrey fought through the pain and snarled at Celestia. "Ha ha. If he dares to show himself, I'll make sure that's when he breathes his last. You should worry about yourself instead," Celestia scoffed scornfully. She did not have enough people with her the last time, but that was not the case now. Jeffrey had more to say, but the York's men had dragged him out of the office. They hung him up outside the branch office. All at once, all the employees in Southlake Corporation's branch office were terrified. "What next, Ms. York? Should we head over to the headquarters of Southlake Corporation?" Ivan asked. "No. Let's stop for the day. We'll attack the headquarters tomorrow," Celestia instructed. "Yes, Ms. York," Ivan replied. "Since you offended me, Caspian, you're going to die," Celestia growled menacingly. She needed to formulate a plan to seize the entire Southlake Corporation. It was time for her to settle the score with Caspian. Over at Mahayan Pavilion in Easton, Homer gave Wiley an update. "Lord Jennings, the Yorks of Dord City have taken action in the 2 Lakes area. I'm guessing they'll soon take over Southlake Corporation." "Good. Let's see how Caspian handles the situation," Wiley said with a laugh. "What's our next step, Lord Jennings?" Homer asked. Rising to his feet, Wiley exuded a murderous air as he said, "Now's not the time for us to declare war on Celestial Sanctum. First, we'll deal with his supporters. Since the 4 noble lineages chose to stand against us, we'll start with them. Give the order. From now on, focus all our resources on wiping out the 4 noble lineages. I want them to disappear from Easton for good." Wiley could already see victory in his hands. "Yes, Lord Jennings," Homer answered. He immediately made the arrangements. Easton was fraught with tension. Few people roamed the streets. The Luckerman family was the most mysterious of the 4 noble lineages. They usually kept a low profile. A century ago, the Luckermans were indisputably the top elite family in Easton. As the situation in Easton continued to evolve, the family's glory declined over time. However, they were still the mightiest of the 4 noble lineages. Inside the living room at Luckerman residence, the heads of the 4 noble lineages gathered to discuss the present circumstances. "Howard, now that we've decided to stand with Celestial Sanctum, Mahayan Pavilion will certainly come after us," Herman said. "That's right. Since Celestial Sanctum is more powerful, Mahayan Pavilion will choose to attack us first. We can't just sit around and wait for that to happen," Jackson chimed in as he nodded in agreement. "Howard, the Luckerman family has always been the top among the 4 of us. Even though we fight among ourselves sometimes, we need to stand united now. I hope you can help us decide our best move," John said as he looked at Howard. All 3 pairs of eyes were on Howard, whose eyes glinted as he sat there with a serious expression. As he was over 60 years old, he witnessed all kinds of crises in Easton. Though the Luckermans were not as powerful as they once were, no one dared to underestimate them. He looked at the three men who were waiting for his answer and said, "Based on strength alone, we can't stand against Mahayan Pavilion. However, we have another option." "What is it?" the three men frantically asked. "If we choose this option, we will all be saved. What we need to do is make our position clear to Mr. Lynch," Howard declared. John, Herman, and Jackson were startled. "Haven't we made ourselves clear enough the other day?" Herman said puzzledly. The other two also looked at Howard in confusion. They did not understand what he meant. Howard said, "I secretly had someone investigate Mr. Lynch. He seems to be nothing more than the Stewart family's metrolocal son-in-law. But he used to serve in the army. Not too long ago, he stirred up huge waves in South Lake City. Even John Anderson, a high-ranking military officer, attended his wedding." He continued, "Mr. Lynch's wife, Willow Stewart, is the CEO of South Lake Corporation. Right now, the company has full control over the Two Lakes area's business market. I'm guessing they came to Easton to expand their business. Even though we've met Mr. Lynch, we haven't shown him enough sincerity. We must prove to him that we are absolutely sincere." The more he said, the more confused the others were. They could not figure out what he was trying to say. Knowing that they were confused, Howard explained, "Right now, all of the businesses in Easton are in the hands of either Mahayan Pavilion or our four families. Celestial Sanctum isn't involved in the same areas as us, so it doesn't count. Since South Lake Corporation wants to expand its business into Easton, we, along with Mahayan Pavilion, are its biggest obstacles. Under these circumstances, what we need to do is give South Lake Corporation a boost." "And how do we do that?" Jackson asked. He was still confused. How could they give South Lake Corporation a boost? "To prove our sincerity, every one of us should give South Lake Corporation 50% of our business assets as an investment." Howard shared his idea. Everyone was stunned. They did not expect Howard to come up with such a plan. The four noble lineages had a great deal of influence in Easton. 50% of their business assets equaled tens of billions. It would be an unthinkable amount to invest in South Lake Corporation. "Are all of you so short-sighted? We won't be losing from our investment. We'll even be making a profit. Either way, you can choose between money or your life. As long as we show our utmost sincerity, Mr. Lynch will certainly keep us safe. Which one of you is sure that your family can go up against Mahayan Pavilion?" Howard asked. The others began to ponder in silence. Even if the four noble lineages combined forces, they still might not be able to withstand the Mahayan Pavilion's attack. Mahayan Pavilion was filled with skilled fighters, while the four noble lineages focused on their businesses and did not train many martial arts experts. Still, it was hard to stomach the idea of giving up half of their assets. "We can accept giving half of our family's assets to Mr. Lynch, but does he truly have the power to protect us?" Herman asked. "Exactly. What if Mr. Lynch can't keep us safe? We might as well give the investment to Celestial Sanctum. That way, Celestial Sanctum will stand with us and protect us," Jackson suggested. "Ha! What a foolish thing to say. The moment the fight breaks out, Celestial Sanctum will have a hard time defending its own people. Do you think they'll choose to protect themselves or protect us?" Howard scoffed.